Today's meeting comes just days after the president's Alaska summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. President Trump saying the two of them did make some significant progress, and the ball is now in Zelensky's court.
The president writing on Truth Social ahead of this afternoon's sit-down, it says this: President Zelenskyy of Ukraine can end the war with Russia almost immediately if he wants to, or he can continue to fight. Remember how it started. No getting back Obama-given Crimea 12 years ago without a shot being fired. And no going into NATO by Ukraine. Some things never change. Triple exclamation point.
And Jacqui Heinrich is joining us live at the White House this morning with more on this. Hi, Jacqui.
Good morning to you guys. There are some signs that Ukraine might be having a hard time backing off its demand for a ceasefire as a condition for peace talks after a series of deadly overnight Russian strikes. Zelensky's chief of staff posted in reaction to those attacks that a ceasefire is essential. President Trump went into this summit on Friday seeking a ceasefire, but said afterward that everyone, including the Europeans and Ukraine, agree that a ceasefire might not hold up.
Has always talked about a ceasefire until he made a lot of different wins in this meeting and began to realize that we could be talking about a peace deal. The ultimate deal here is a peace deal. And we were talking about much more robust security guarantees than anyone ever imagined before.
Zelenskyy, who is already in D.C., said the Russian strikes ahead of today's meeting are symbolic and, quote, Putin will commit demonstrative killings to maintain pressure on Ukraine and Europe, as well as to humiliate diplomatic efforts. That is precisely why we are seeking assistance to put an end to the killings. That is why reliable security guarantees are required. That is why Russia should not be rewarded for its participation in this war. That last line could be a sign that Zelenskyy is rejecting Putin's proposal to freeze the front line if Ukraine hands over control of the Donbas region, which Russia has not been able to conquer militarily. It is headquarters for Ukraine's forces in the east, and it's home to key parts of its industrial defense base. Analysts have warned giving that up might give Russia a huge advantage, which makes President Trump's openness to U.S. involvement in security guarantees even more critical. Zelenskyy warned in a post yesterday Ukraine was given, quote, so-called security guarantees in 1994, but they didn't work, and Russia instead used the territory they gave up as a springboard for a new attack. But European leaders see the U.S. offer to back security guarantees as invaluable with this war happening in their backyard.
Let's be frank, this is not our war. The United States is not in a war. Ukraine is in a war, and we've been supporting Ukraine. If tomorrow the war continues, life in America will not be fundamentally altered. So I think that what we have to understand is that this has been a priority for this president because he wants to promote peace.
White House officials have emphasized that everyone is going to have to give something up in this negotiation. So it looks like the topic today is going to be, what exactly is that? Bill and Dana.
And Jacqui, what is the White House's response to criticism that Trump basically gave Putin a platform, pulled him out of isolation, and didn't get much for it?
You know, they rejected that criticism even before the meeting, saying in the first term, President Trump met with Kim Jong-un 3 times. He's still very isolated. He engaged with the Iranians directly, which is not something you usually do, offered them a deal. When they rejected it, he bombed them, took out their nuclear program. So he is willing to sit across from whoever he needs to try to get this done. And also, the Europeans see the offer for security guarantees as a very material success of that meeting. So they reject that flat out. Dana.
Okay, Jacqui Heinrich, thank you so much. A busy day at the White House indeed. And Rebeccah Heinrich is a national security analyst and senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. She joins us now. Great to have you, Rebeccah. Your top-line thoughts as we head into a very busy day.
Well, it's going to come down to what the security guarantees look like. Zelenskyy is obviously right that if he's going to retreat from any kind of territory, he's not going to retreat from territory that the Russians currently don't have complete control out of. But if he is required to retreat, he needs to have some tangible material security guarantees beyond something like the Budapest Memorandum of 1994, which is currently in place and hasn't provided any security for him. So he's going to want to know, are there European boots on the ground? What is the United States going to do to back those European troops? That needs to happen, or Zelensky's not going to budge at all.
Rebeccah, Shannon Bream of Fox News Sunday asked Steve Witkoff, the president's negotiator, about security guarantees. Let's listen here.
So let's talk about the security guarantees, because you mentioned those. What does that mean in practicality? What is the U.S. willing to commit to that effort to give Ukraine the assurances it needs to come to the table?
It means that the United States is potentially prepared to be able to give Article 5 security guarantees, but not from NATO, directly from the United States and other European countries. That is big. I mean, really big.
That's what I noticed too. I thought that did seem like such a significant part of it. And over the weekend, the media narrative wasn't really focused on that point about security guarantees. Here's Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, clashing a bit on this issue.
You know, there is concern from the Europeans that President Zelenskyy is going to be bullied into signing something away. That's why you have these European leaders coming as backup tomorrow. Can you
No, it isn't. That's not why they're coming
them?
as back. That's not true. No, but that's not that's not true. We've had one meeting with Putin and like a dozen meetings with Zelenskyy. But that's not true. They're not coming here tomorrow to keep Zelenskyy from being bullied. They're coming here tomorrow because we've been working with the Europeans. This is such a stupid media narrative that they're coming here tomorrow because Trump is going to bully Zelenskyy into a bad deal. We've been working with these people for weeks.
Rebeccah, from where I sit, and I'd love your perspective, President Trump is in such a different place with NATO today than he was in the first term, and he gets along very well with them. He's been communicating with them. He has better relationships, and they're better to him as well. What do you think about with that clash just there between Rubio and Brennan?
Well, I think that Secretary Rubio he's sincere and frustrated because of the progress that we have made to make NATO stronger, more lethal. The United States is more engaged with NATO. President Trump has been completely convinced that the NATO alliance is not simply there as freeloaders, that it's there to provide security for the American people, that strong allies are good for American security, weak allies are dangerous. President Trump has made NATO stronger. So I do think it's important, though, that we have solidarity with European allies today moving forward, and that President Zelenskyy gets concrete, specific things. Even Article 5, just sort of notionally, isn't going to be good enough. He's going to know specifics and if there's going to be actually boots on the ground to make sure the Russians don't continue to advance.
Do you have an opinion about the difference of asking for a ceasefire versus pushing for a complete peace deal?
Well, I think a ceasefire is obviously, it should be a first step because it shows that the Russians are actually willing to end the war. The fact that the Russians are increasing the tempo of these attacks and they're attacking civilians shows to me that there's no reason to trust the Russians, which is why we have to go into this not looking for something, something that everybody's going to like and be disappointed by, but actually it has to be an American-led, pro-Ukraine, pro-Europe, forcing the Russians to stop. And that means you're going to have credible threats of sanctions, U.S. Backing, security backing. And Dana, the last point, we need to understand where this line of contact is. The Russians cannot force Ukraine to give up territory that Russia hasn't even gained control of. And nobody can blame Zelenskyy for saying no to that. So that's going to be another line of friction.
And always, everybody has their constituencies, and he has his as well, as President Trump does here at home. Rebeccah Heinrich, thank you so much.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.